A crisp autumn chill swept over the sprawling campus of Hamilton College as twilight descended, its fading light painting the football stadium in hues of amber and shadow. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the fervor of an impending game where legends were born and reputations shattered. Amid the cacophony of pre-game chants and the steady hum of anticipation, the scene shifted to the hushed confines of the locker room, a place where bravado reigned, and every glance carried a challenge. It was in this crucible of college football pride that a solitary figure emerged, a quiet, unassuming freshman whose presence was as inconspicuous as a whisper in a roaring crowd. His eyes, dark and inscrutable, revealed nothing of the fierce storm that simmered beneath his calm exterior. Unlike the swaggering upperclassmen, whose laughter and taunts resonated like the clash of titans, he moved with a deliberate stillness, as if each step was measured against the weight of his own secret. Almost immediately, his arrival stirred a ripple of derision among the established players. At the center of this jeering cohort stood the team captain, a figure as imposing as he was arrogant, whose every sneer and dismissive gesture radiated an unyielding confidence. With a few cutting remarks and mocking glances, the captain and his cronies singled out the quiet kid, treating his silence as a mark of weakness. Their laughter, cruel and unrestrained, bounced off the locker room walls, a chorus of scorn that belied the dangerous game they were about to play. Yet, beneath the surface of their contempt lay an ignorance that would soon prove costly. For, while the bullies reveled in their dominance, they remained oblivious to the latent fury cloaked in the freshmen's quietude, a fury born not of reckless impulse, but of disciplined strength and hidden skill. In that charged moment, as the echoes of ridicule mingled with the fading light of day, an unspoken promise hung in the air. The calm before the storm was about to give way to a reckoning that would leave these bullies reeling in disbelief. They had no inkling that, by choosing to mock the quiet kid, they had set in motion events that would upend their world. A swift, brutal reminder that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And before we continue, please leave a like and sub and comment where you're watching from. Under the glare of a relentless midday sun, the college campus pulsed with energy and tradition. Hamilton College's football program was more than a team. It was a storied institution, where every locker, every trophy case, and every echo in the hallowed corridors of the locker room whispered tales of glory and grit. In this realm of unyielding pride and fierce competition, every newcomer was measured against a legacy of brute strength and unwavering confidence. Into this crucible stepped a solitary figure, a quiet, unassuming freshman whose presence was as subtle as a whisper amid the roar of pre-game rituals. He moved with a deliberate calm, his eyes harboring secrets that belied his gentle demeanor. Unlike the established players who reveled in their boisterous camaraderie and rugged posturing, he carried himself with a measured restraint that set him apart. His silence was not born of shyness, but of a contemplative nature, a depth that hinted at untold stories and hidden reserves of strength. Within moments of his arrival, murmurs rippled through the locker room. Established players exchanged knowing glances, their curiosity mingling with disdain. At the center of this tight-knit brotherhood stood the team captain, a towering charismatic figure whose reputation for ruthless dominance was unmatched. With a dismissive sneer and a few choice words, he singled out the quiet kid as an easy mark, a target for the daily rituals of hazing that defined the team's brutal hierarchy. The captain's derisive laughter and the mocking jabs of his cronies cut through the charged atmosphere, branding the new recruit as different, as weak, a mark of contempt in a culture where only strength commanded respect. As the days unfolded, the quiet kid's existence became a canvas for the team's escalating pranks and cruel jests. The locker room, once a sanctuary of brotherhood, transformed into a stage for derision. His locker was defaced with crude graffiti, his gear mysteriously tampered with, and every whispered taunt in the corridor stung like a cold slap. What began as playful banter quickly mutated into a systematic effort to break his spirit. Yet, he met each provocation with an unsettling calm, his silence deepening the mystery of his character. Each slight and each jibe was absorbed in a manner that left his tormentors both infuriated and baffled. In hushed corners and between bouts of raucous laughter, a few observant teammates began to notice the subtle flicker of resolve in the quiet kid's eyes, a fleeting hardening of his gaze, a tightening of his jaw that suggested an inner fire rarely seen. To the bullies, his composure was a sign of cowardice, a challenge to be exploited. But beneath that placid exterior lay years of discipline and a history of struggle, a latent force that had yet to be unleashed. As practice, sessions wore on and the atmosphere grew ever more charged. The tension escalated. The bullies, led by the imperious captain, escalated their tactics from verbal jabs to physical intimidation. In one particularly sweltering afternoon, as the team gathered on the dew-soaked practice field, the captain orchestrated a cruel initiation stunt. In full view of the team, he cornered the quiet kid near the bleachers, jabbing him with harsh words and shoving him with deliberate force. The act was meant to humiliate, to reduce the silent newcomer to a spectacle of weakness. The laughter that followed was deafening, the jeers echoing off the field. Yet the quiet kid's face remained an unreadable mask. But even as the laughter filled the air, an undercurrent of tension pulsed beneath the surface. In that charged moment, when the bullies thought they had secured their victory, a spark ignited within the quiet kid, a spark that had long been smoldering in the depths of his restrained composure. His eyes, normally so placid, flashed with a hint of something formidable. It was as if, in that fleeting moment, he weighed every insult, every shove, and every sneer, and decided that silence was no longer an option. The escalating torment, the pranks that grew increasingly invasive, and the physical jabs that cut deeper than words, all of it served as the prelude to a transformation. The team's raucous laughter began to falter as murmurs of uncertainty spread. Some of the more seasoned players exchanged wary looks, sensing that the dynamic was about to change. The quiet kid's calm was no longer a passive shield. It was the eye of an approaching storm. In the charged corridors of the team sanctuary, the quiet kid's hidden strength loomed like a specter over the mocking faces of his tormentors. Each subsequent act of bullying, each calculated humiliation, only fanned the flames of a force waiting to erupt. And so, amid the relentless clamor of college football fervor and the oppressive weight of tradition, the stage was set for a reckoning. A moment when the quiet kid would no longer be a silent bystander, but a force to be reckoned with. In the fading light of a chilly evening, the tension reached its tipping point on a deserted stretch behind the stadium. The bullies had gathered with a predatory focus, their voices low and laced with cruelty. This wasn't just another round of taunts or pranks. It was a calculated hazing ritual designed to break the quiet kid once and for all. The team captain, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous mix of arrogance and desperation, stepped forward with a challenge that cut through the cold air. "Show us what you're really made of." His words, intended to provoke, hung heavily over the scene. Cornered, near a row of weathered bleachers, the quiet kid felt the full weight of their hostility. The bullies closed in, each step deliberate, each shove an attempt to strip him of whatever dignity he clung to. For a long, agonizing moment, silence reigned as he absorbed every insult and every physical blow with unnerving calm. Then, as one of the aggressors delivered a particularly forceful push, something within him snapped. The quiet kid's eyes flashed with an intensity that no one had ever witnessed before. In a heartbeat, his restraint dissolved into controlled fury. With precise, almost balletic movements, he countered the attack. His actions were not chaotic or wild, but were marked by a discipline that belied his previously unassuming presence. One bully was sent sprawling to the ground. Another staggered back as if struck by an invisible force. In that charged moment, the captain himself hesitated, his confident sneer faltering into an expression of shock. The quiet kid, whose silence had long masked a deep reservoir of strength, now stood as a force that could no longer be ignored. The breaking point had been reached. and the repercussions of that instant would ripple through the entire team. In the days that followed, the fallout from that fateful confrontation spread like wildfire through the locker room and beyond. What had been a culture of unbridled bravado and relentless hazing transformed overnight into an atmosphere of hushed reverence and uneasy respect. Whispers of the quiet kid's stunning retaliation echoed through the corridors, carried on the lips of teammates who now regarded him with a mix of awe and trepidation. The team captain, once the undisputed symbol of dominance, found his authority undermined. His once commanding presence was now tinged with vulnerability. His dismissive smirks and mocking laughter were replaced by furtive glances and silent, regretful nods. The bullies, who had once reveled in their power, were forced to confront the reality that they had underestimated someone they had dismissed as weak. In locker room conversations and late-night discussions, his name was spoken with an almost sacred hush, a reminder that the rules of the game had irrevocably changed. The quiet kid, for his part, maintained his reserved demeanor, yet the aura around him had shifted. No longer did his silence mark him as an easy target. It now resonated as a symbol of unyielding strength. Those who had once taunted him now watched from a distance, their eyes filled with a newfound wariness. Even the coaches, who had long overlooked his quiet presence, exchanged glances that spoke of concern and a reluctant respect for the power he had just demonstrated. Across the campus, in the charged air of practice fields and the somber corners of the locker room, it became unmistakably clear. The old order was gone. The bullies had not only lost their grip on their victim, they had jeopardized their own standing. The public shift was complete. In that silent, transformative moment, the quiet kid had rewritten the rules. His retaliation was not a call for more violence or a desire for vengeance. It was a stark, undeniable assertion that sometimes the most unassuming individuals carry within them a storm that can change everything. Under the cloak of twilight, as the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to the encroaching darkness, the campus's hidden corners transformed into an arena of reckoning. The air was thick with anticipation and unspoken challenge, a space where the rigid order of college football hierarchy would soon be violently upended. Behind the stadium, in a secluded corridor rarely touched by the glare of spotlights, the stage was set. Here, where tradition and unspoken codes reigned supreme, the time for retribution had finally arrived. Word of the quiet kid's earlier defiant act had spread like wildfire, and now the very atmosphere vibrated with a mix of fear and fury. The team's notorious bullies, once so confident in their invincibility, gathered in a tight semicircle. At their helm, the team captain, whose reputation for cruelty and dominance had long been unquestioned, stood glaring, his eyes burning with the desperate need to restore his shattered authority. His voice, a harsh rasp mingled with anger, rang out as he challenged, "Prove you belong here." The words, meant to belittle, only stoked the smoldering embers of the quiet kid's long-suppressed fury. The ground beneath their feet, slick with the remnants of an earlier rain, reflected the dim glow of distant streetlights, lending the scene an otherworldly quality. In that space, time itself appeared to contract. Every heartbeat, every measured breath, seemed to hold its own in the charged silence before the storm of violence erupted. The quiet kid, standing at the center of the gathering, exuded an almost eerie calm. His eyes, once so reserved and unreadable, now shimmered with a promise that the quietude they had mocked was not the absence of power, but the stillness before an inevitable tempest. Then, without warning, the dam of pent-up aggression burst forth. The captain lunged first, a blur of raw aggression aiming a vicious punch at the quiet kid's face. In a display of fluid precision, the quiet kid sidestepped effortlessly, his movements measured and deliberate. What followed was a rapid series of exchanges, a dance of violence where every gesture was at once both graceful and devastating. The quiet kids' counterattacks were not the frenzied, uncontrolled responses one might expect from an untested newcomer. They were the calculated, almost balletic maneuvers of a fighter whose discipline and hidden skill had been honed in silence. Each strike he delivered was like a masterful stroke, a reminder that his silence had been a mask concealing a torrent of raw, lethal power. His fists moved with the certainty of a seasoned warrior, every blow precise, every parry a statement. The bullies, caught in the grip of their own bluster, found themselves overwhelmed by the quiet kid's unexpected ferocity. Their shouts and jeers fell away into a dissonant backdrop as his calm determination silenced the chaos. Amid the melee, the captain's face, once etched with invincible arrogance, began to betray the first signs of doubt. In a moment of desperate overreach, as he swung wildly to regain control, the quiet kid intercepted the blow with such finesse that the captain staggered, his confident sneer replaced by a look of shock and disbelief. The impact of that singular exchange sent a ripple through the assembled group, shattering their previously unassailable unity. One by one, the bullies' movements grew sluggish, their coordinated attacks disintegrating into disarray. Their eyes, once alight with the thrill of dominance, now darted around in confused fear, each aware that the rules of engagement had irrevocably changed. The corridor reverberated with the sound of fists meeting flesh, of labored breaths, and of a new, unsettling silence that began to descend as the quiet kid's blows fell with unerring accuracy. There was no gratuitous brutality here. Each movement was economical, driven solely by the need to end the charade of cruelty. His attacks were swift, almost surgical, designed not to maim indiscriminately, but to send a clear, indelible message. Arrogance and cruelty would no longer be tolerated. In the midst of the fray, the captain hesitated, a fleeting, yet significant pause that spoke volumes. In that suspended moment, it became apparent to everyone present that his reign was collapsing. The silence that followed was heavy with the realization that the quiet kid was not merely a victim, but a force awakened. Even as some of the bullies attempted to rally, their efforts were futile. The quiet kid's control over the confrontation was absolute. Every counter, every strike, dismantled the illusion of their invulnerability. As the final echoes of the struggle subsided, the corridor stood in a state of surreal stillness. The quiet kid, though visibly breathing heavily from exertion, maintained an air of calm authority. His eyes, now free of the storm's fury, reflected the profound transformation that had taken place. A transformation that left the bullies broken and the captain's pride in tatters. Without a word, he turned and began to walk away, leaving behind a tableau of defeated aggressors and a lingering silence that bore testament to the night's seismic shift. In that decisive, brutal showdown, the old order had been shattered. The quiet kid's hidden strength had been laid bare for all to see. An unforgettable demonstration that silence could indeed roar louder than the most thunderous of shouts. The echoes of that violent dance would resonate long after the final blow was struck. A lasting reminder that true power often lies concealed beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to emerge. In the quiet hours following the showdown, as the remnants of the confrontation were gradually absorbed by the night, a palpable shift began to take root within the heart of the team. The once raucous corridors behind the stadium, stained with the echoes of violence and bruised egos, now bore the weight of an unsettling introspection. The events of that fateful evening had irrevocably altered the delicate balance of power, leaving behind a silence heavy with both regret and the promise of change. The team captain, once the undisputed arbiter of fear and dominance, now limped through the aftermath with a visible heaviness. His once commanding presence had been reduced to a shadow of uncertainty. In the dim light of the locker room that followed the altercation, his bruised face and faltering posture were stark reminders of his fall from grace. The bullies, too, wore expressions of shame and disbelief. Faces that had been accustomed to smiles of scorn now contorted with reluctant acknowledgement of their miscalculation. The once unified front of arrogance was fractured. Each member left to grapple with the stark reality that they had underestimated someone they had long dismissed. As word of the confrontation spread, the locker room became a crucible of whispered conversations and reflective silence. The echoes of the violent encounter mingled with the soft rustle of uniforms and the slow, measured steps of those who now bore witness to a new order. Some of the more seasoned players, who had once taken pride in their roles as enforcers of an unyielding hierarchy, exchanged glances filled with unspoken questions. What had truly changed that night? Was it merely the fall of one man's pride, or had the very foundation of their culture been shaken to its core? In the days that followed, the quiet kid's transformation became undeniable. No longer relegated to the background as a silent, unassuming presence, he emerged as a figure of quiet authority, a beacon of restrained strength that spoke volumes without the need for boastful declarations. His interactions, both on and off the field, were marked by a newfound confidence that resonated with an unspoken power. When he walked through the corridors, even those who had once sneered at his silence now fell into respectful, subdued quietude. His presence had redefined the boundaries of what it meant to be strong within the team. Meanwhile, the fallout extended beyond the confines of the locker room. Coaches, who had long tolerated a brutal initiation culture as an unfortunate rite of passage, began to take a more measured interest in the changing dynamics. In hushed meetings and after-practice conversations, they spoke of the need for a new era, one where strength was measured not by the ability to inflict pain, but by the capacity to command respect through discipline and integrity. There was a sense that the violent upheaval of that night was a catalyst for something far greater than mere retribution. It was an opportunity to rebuild a culture on foundations far more stable and honorable than those built on cruelty. The campus itself seemed to take notice. In the early hours of dawn, as the first light revealed a field damp with dew and possibilities, the quiet kids' legend began to permeate even the peripheral corners of college life. Fellow students, drawn by the rumor of a silent warrior who had stood up to insurmountable odds, whispered his name with a mixture of awe and caution. Faculty members, though unspoken participants in the intricate tapestry of campus culture, exchanged knowing looks that hinted at an emerging respect for the quiet strength that had redefined the team's ethos. Yet, for all the external changes, the quiet kid remained remarkably unchanged on the inside. True to his nature, he neither boasted of his newfound status nor sought validation in the adoration of his peers. Instead, he carried himself with the same measured, reflective composure that had defined him long before the confrontation. In moments of solitude, quiet evenings in the now less turbulent locker room, or solitary walks along the campus pathways, he allowed himself brief reflections on the events that had transpired. There was no trace of regret or vindictive satisfaction in his demeanor, only a sober recognition of the weight of the choices made and the knowledge that the cycle of cruelty had finally been disrupted. As practice resumed and the team slowly attempted to stitch together the fabric of their shared identity, the quiet kid's influence became ever more apparent. No longer did the hallways resound with the careless laughter of tormentors. Instead, a measured respect began to replace the once ubiquitous arrogance. Even the fallen captain, now isolated by his own bruised ego and physical wounds, found himself the subject of quiet admonishment, a living reminder that unchecked cruelty could have consequences far beyond a single night's fury. In that fragile equilibrium between the past and the promise of a better future, the quiet kid's presence stood as a symbol of transformation. The night's brutal events had carved a lasting lesson into the soul of the team. True strength, when harnessed with discipline and humility, had the power to dismantle even the most entrenched hierarchies. And as the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the practice field and the locker room alike, it was clear that the era of thoughtless bullying was drawing to a close. The resolution was not marked by grand declarations or overt celebrations. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. It was present in the way teammates exchanged respectful nods, in the quiet determination that now underpinned every drill, and in the unspoken understanding that what had transpired could never be undone, only learned from. The campus, The team, and even the quiet kid himself had been forever changed by that fateful night. A night when silence had roared louder than any shout. In the wake of that fateful confrontation, as the tension that had electrified the night finally began to dissipate, a new silence fell over the campus. A silence imbued not with fear or resignation, but with the weight of change. The once impenetrable aura of arrogance that had defined the college football team was now punctured by the undeniable presence of the quiet kid, whose resolute transformation had left an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed it. In the quiet aftermath of the showdown, the atmosphere pulsed with a subdued energy, inviting every onlooker to question what true strength really meant. As the echoes of clashing bodies and shattering pride faded into memory, a reflective calm settled over the scene. The campus, still humming with the routine of early morning classes and pre-practice drills, now bore the unmistakable signature of a pivotal moment. A moment when the old order was irrevocably rewritten. Teammates who had once sneered now exchanged furtive glances of respect and, perhaps, even a hint of awe. The very air seemed to vibrate with unspoken questions. What drives a person to harbor such hidden power? How can silence, often mistaken for weakness, transform into a force that challenges tyranny? It is within this transformative space that we invite you, the listener, to pause and reflect. Think back to a time when you underestimated someone, or perhaps when you yourself were underestimated. In those moments, did you see the quiet strength that lay beneath the surface? The story of the quiet kid is not merely a tale of brutal retribution. It is a testament to the idea that true power is often concealed behind a veneer of calm, awaiting the moment of reckoning. His journey is a reminder that strength need not always be loud and boisterous. Sometimes it manifests as a measured, deliberate force that disrupts the status quo without fanfare. Now, as the final notes of this story echo in your mind, consider the lessons it holds. The transformation we have witnessed is not just about physical might, but about the courage to stand firm in the face of relentless adversity. It challenges the notion that vulnerability is a liability and invites us to redefine what it means to be strong. In the quiet resilience of the new recruit, there is an invitation to all of us to rise above the pettiness of cruelty, to trust in the power that lies dormant within, and to confront our own challenges with the quiet dignity of one who knows their worth. Before you let this story fade into the background of your daily life, we encourage you to take a moment to share your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated in a way that turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Or perhaps you've witnessed someone's silent strength emerge at just the right moment. Reflect on these experiences and let them guide you to see the potential in every quiet corner of life. And as you ponder these questions, remember to join the conversation. Share your insights, your personal stories of unexpected strength, and let us know if you've ever witnessed the kind of transformation that challenges the very fabric of expectation. Your voice is a vital part of this dialogue, a dialogue that reminds us that sometimes the quietest among us have the loudest stories to tell. In the days and weeks that followed the unforgettable showdown, the campus and the team found themselves caught in a subtle yet profound transformation. The corridors of the locker room, once echoing with raucous banter and the dismissive sneers of bullies, now resonated with a cautious respect. Every footstep, every hushed conversation carried an unspoken acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted. An awakening that redefined not only individual identities, but also the collective spirit of the team. The quiet kid, who had once blended into the background as a mere whisper among the shouts of his peers, began to embody a new kind of leadership, one built on the quiet assurance of inner strength rather than overt displays of bravado. His demeanor, calm and unyielding, served as a living reminder that true resilience is forged in moments of intense adversity. In the reflective silence that followed each practice and in the measured looks exchanged across the field, his influence could be felt. Teammates who had once reveled in their cruelty now found themselves questioning the old ways. The hard-edged, Hierarchy, maintained by fear and dominance, was slowly being replaced by an ethos that valued respect, humility, and the courage to stand up for what is right. The team captain, the former emblem of unchecked authority, experienced a solitary reckoning of his own. Isolated by the fallout of that brutal night, he was left to confront the consequences of his actions, consequences that echoed far beyond a single altercation. In quiet moments of introspection, away from the prying eyes of the team, he grappled with the realization that his power was not absolute. His once confident facade had crumbled, revealing a vulnerability that he had long denied. This personal reckoning, though painful, hinted at the possibility of redemption and growth, a transformation that might one day mend the fractured bonds of the team. Beyond the confines of the locker room, whispers of the night's events began to ripple through the broader campus. Students, faculty, and even the coaching staff started to perceive a shift in the very culture of college life. What was once accepted as an unfortunate but unchangeable part of the athletic experience now seemed ripe for reconsideration. In informal gatherings and late-night conversations, the story of the quiet kid's defiant stand evolved into a symbol of change, a call to re-examine the values of strength, discipline, and respect. As the new season approached, the legacy of that decisive night loomed large. It was not merely a tale of retribution, but a turning point that promised a more inclusive and thoughtful approach to competition and camaraderie. Practices took on a different tone. Drills were executed with a renewed focus on teamwork rather than individual dominance. The subtle transformation was evident in the way players looked at one another, not with scorn, but with a mutual understanding that each person carried their own battles, their own hidden strengths. In this epilogue of reflection, the quiet kid's journey serves as a beacon of hope and a reminder that even in the harshest environments, the seeds of change can take root. His story is not confined to a single moment of explosive action, but continues to reverberate in the hearts of those who dare to challenge injustice. It is a quiet revolution, a testament to the enduring power of resilience and the possibility of transformation when we dare to listen to the silence within. As you carry these reflections with you, remember that every ending is also a beginning. The legacy of the quiet kid invites us to rethink our definitions of power and strength, urging us to find courage in our quietest moments. Let this story inspire you to question the status quo, to seek out the hidden depths in yourself and in others, and to believe that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single, unassuming act of defiance.